Shelli, welcome back to another episode.
Thank you.
We've touched on this topic a number of times in the previous episodes, but seems like it warrants its own segment, and that is policy exclusions. So maybe you could lead us on a little journey there.
Specific to contracting in general.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've talked about in the previous episodes about the built-in exclusions in a general liability policy, the auto, pollution, so forth, workers' comp.
You've got to pick up an additional. Okay.
Right. And then when you fill out your questionnaire, very important, again, it's a warranty to the policy. You say, I only do this kind of work, that kind of work, and so forth. And so we will back up into that and limit your work at that point, right?
Okay.
So then the exclusions themselves that will say things, and you can look. The best advice I could give anybody is to look at the forms list. It will come with your quote, or it's usually right behind the deck page, and it'll name things, and it'll say tract home exclusion, or it'll be a company, a surplus lines company that isn't regulated, will have things that'll say things like common policy exclusions. You want to see that form because we don't know what that is, right? They're hiding something. Rarely is a form that says something as vague as that is good.
So the exclusions should be very spelled out.
Yes.
You shouldn't have to go look them up.
Right. They're hiding something when they do something like that. So by reading that list, I mean, some of them are very obvious and they'll say flat out, it's an action over exclusion or it's a tract home exclusion or something. Yeah. But if it's vague, you want to see it. Yeah. And for me, I know if there's anything that's sketchy or really close to home, or I want my client to really pay attention to it, I will actually print the form out and then I will underline and circle and then I'll write my handwriting so they'll look at it.
Yeah.
And then I stamp those. I call it kachinking them. I have read this and I understand it, and I make them sign them.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying so hard.
Because maybe you didn't get clear information up front. You still have a couple questions as the agent. Yeah. Well, when I look, we look on websites, we look on LinkedIn, we look at, social media and things like that. And you see things, that's not a single family residential
project. I don't look anything like what they're telling me. So things like that. But some of the common ones that are the deadly ones, I guess, the deadly sins of it all is tract home or condo or attached multifamily. Here's a great situation I've just been dealing with is my client was building, and they were fee simple, so not condo, but attached townhomes. Okay. And so the subcontractor sent in a certificate, and we had, my risk management company was handling it. And so on our example, it said 14 unit townhome. How much more clear can you be? And also on the request, and I'm sure that the request for proposal that my client actually sent out for the bid also explained the project on it, right? Okay. So those items, I know that our example and our checklist that described the project went to the agent. And they sent us a certificate saying project 14 unit townhome, in Seattle, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then we came back and said, hey, our request said, please include the forms list, right? And so we get the forms list that says townhome exclusion.
Oh.
Wow, this agent literally wrote townhome with a townhome exclusion on it. There is no quality control going on there. So those are the things to watch for. So, looking for tract home exclusion, which is a slang. And, some of them will say, like, kind, and quality. And some of them will say on the same street, or some will say 5 homes in a development.
It all sort of mean the same
continuous
thing.
Roads and together. And so, if you don't know what the definition in the policy of what a tract home is, well, how do you know if you're building tract homes or siding in a tract home, right? Yeah. And then action over exclusions, that's deadly. In the state of Washington, there's an agreement it was a STUT agreement is what they call it, but it was an actual lawsuit. And in Washington, under the Safety and Workplace Act, the general contractor is responsible for the safety in the workplace. It's a strict liability. That if you get sued as the general under the STUT agreement, basically you're going to pay. It's just how much you're going to pay. There's no way out of it. You're going to pay something. Now, the subcontractor has signed a subcontractor agreement saying, I'm going to indemnify you, means to pay you back if anything happens, which includes their subs suing the general contractor. So that general contractor is going to be sued. They're going to come back and try to bring the subcontractor into it. Yeah. So if that subcontractor has an action over exclusion, they're self-insured. And those claims, either they go one of two ways. So oftentimes we find out they're habitual. They've had many workers' comp claims and done this many times, because even just filing the claim, you're almost guaranteed $5,000 just for the sake of doing it. And then there's real ones. Of course, there's real. Sure. I mean, there's times where it's absolutely legitimate, but was it the general contractor's responsibility?
Yeah.
Right? So that care and control of their own employees is why the subcontractor agreement ultimately really exists. You know, they warrant their product and things in there as well, but that is very important. So an action over exclusions can be hidden in there. It's actually from the contractual liability. So all of the contracts say you must have blanket contractual, you know, including anything covered by this agreement. So you can't get out of it, but they'll be excluded, and they'll do it in many clever ways. Most common way, though, is in the definitions. This is really important. If nothing else, check the definition of insured contract, and there'll be A through F. And if there isn't an F, then you don't have contractual liability. That's the one that'll say lease a railroad agreement, lease a premises, and whatever that are agreed insured contracts that are covered for contractual liability that you have for being involved in that contract. And F is your tort liability. And that is what that would come from. It's your just general civil type liabilities. So if F is gone, you have a huge problem. That's one of the things I immediately check in the policy, is to make sure that they haven't messed with that.
Yeah, one of my questions, you were talking about making sure you read through the exclusions. Is that language closely paired to the definitions language? Do they typically?
Yeah.
They do a pretty good job of that. So if I'm reading it and I know my definitions, that's not creating additional confusion.
No. The defined terms in the contractor I've never seen them not work together. That would be a really terrible carrier.
Okay. That question I mentioned I wanted to ask you earlier was, say, like these surplus lines folks that come in, they're sort of playing dirty pool. The one thing I remember from a business law class in college was the term, I think it was exculpatory clause. Have you ever seen that come up in your world, where insurance commissioner, somebody came down, or a judge came down and just said, you can't say that. That's just wrong, and we're not going to support you, and we're going to pay these guys.
Yeah, that's what the carriers are afraid of when they take over, is that they can put all the exclusions they want in there, but at the end of the day, the judge is going to say, pay the man.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's, that's unfair
it's just not
practices.
Reasonable.
It's not reasonable.
Yeah.
It's, the prior work is the big one, and that can come in all sorts of forms. They'll call it continuous and progressive manifestation. I mean, if nothing else, even if you put your policy in a PDF and you do the word search, you can put in the word manifestation. That would be a really good one to search, and you might find something. Okay. But again, you really got to rely on your agent to tell you. And if they haven't talked to you about any of this stuff, then they're not doing their job.
Yeah.
If they haven't had a conversation with you and asked you about your business, they don't know what you're doing. And how can you insure something if you don't know what they're doing?
So this boils down again, me as the client.
Yeah.
One of those things on my list is I need to ask my agent broker, what are my policy exclusions, and explain them to me. And let's talk about it in the context of the work we understand that I do.
Yeah.
And and
gosh, if you call them up and they've sent you a quote and they start fumbling, big, huge warning flag. That means they haven't even read it. Don't know. Ouch.
Hate it when that happens.
Yeah. Imagine, we're the doctor, you're the patient, and you go to your doctor and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure what I sewed up and put in there for you.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Again, great session. Thank you. Appreciate it.